Hello, I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content at Telecom TV, and you're watching our series of programs for the Great Telco Debate 2021. And joining me now is Keri Gilder, the CEO of Colt. Keri, very good to see you again. And no, you're not able to attend the Great Telco Debate in person this year, but we're absolutely delighted that you're able to contribute remotely via our studios. And one of the debates at this year's event looks at the relationship between telcos and the hyperscalers. Now, there's this broad belief that it's not a case of telcos versus hyperscalers. Do you believe it's more a case of them actually needing each other, and hence partnerships are mutually beneficial? And will it always be a symbiotic relationship, or are we going to end up with a power struggle and one that the hyperscalers might inevitably win?
I think it's a very good question because this is a debate that's happened at least since I've been in the industry, and the cloud has really come, to the forefront. Our take on this at Colt is that it is a partnership relationship. We have very good relationships with all of the hyperscalers, and I do think that they need us as much as we need them. If you think about it from an enterprise perspective, they think about the application, they think about the workload, they think about the cloud, and then they think about the connectivity. But cloud without connectivity, and that being a highly reliable, highly flexible and agile and secure environment, is not going to work. And we've seen the hyperscale community try to build fiber. They've tried to become telcos in some instances over the last really decade. And I think what they've decided is that's not the business that they want to be in, but they need strong partners in order to enable the business that they do want to be in, which is the applications, the workloads, and driving that content delivery down to the consumer or the enterprise. So I personally believe that as long as we can create value in the relationship, there always will be a good niche for both the hyperscaler and the telecommunications provider to play in.
Well, you talk about creating value there, Keri. So, how do partnerships with hyperscalers help telcos such as Colt move away from being simply providers of connectivity? And is there, on the other side of this equation, is there a risk that this will merely lead to them becoming local retailers of the hyperscaler services?
It's interesting. I know that COP26 just happened here in the UK. And the reason that I bring that up is because there is a value proposition there. If you look at IT as an industry, we would rank third behind China and the United States for energy consumption. So I think if you simply look at these relationships just as connectivity and cloud, then the value proposition, could be commoditized. It could be even just call it a basic contract and very transactional at the end of the day. But I think as a community and an industry, we all have to work together in order to understand, number one, the customer experience that we want to provide, and that full solution from, connectivity to cloud to driving the particular workload and digital and data transaction that they need in order to give them the insights that they require to drive their business. But I also think there's this essence of community, there's this essence of climate that we have to take into consideration. And the reality is we have to work together in order to ensure that we're solving these critical problems for the world. Again, not just for our customers, but also for our communities and for the climate that we're creating around us as we're starting to develop the next generation of data center, the next generation of fiber connectivity, or even digital platform that rides on top of that. I think you have to look at it as a 360 ecosystem with the basics around the connectivity, the climate, the community, and ultimately, if you do that, you'll create the customer experiences that's going to be beneficial for all entities involved.
Well, you referenced COP26 there, which leads us nicely to one of the other debates at this year's event, which looks at green networks. Now, the telecoms industry has been vocally supporting the move towards lower emissions and lower power consumption for many, many years. Yet collectively, it's never really risen to the challenge and become a change leader, either for itself or for its vertical industry customers. So what makes you think today is different? And as COP26 fades away, will telecoms ever play a leading role in instigating positive change?
I think that's a debate that we're going to have over the next 12 to 18 months. I think what came out of COP26 is some great ideas on what we need to go and deliver in the between now and 2030 on through 2050 in order to create a net zero type of environment. But the commitment is the question. What is the commitment to actually doing it? And you're correct. We've talked a lot about it over the last few decades, but what are we actually doing? And I think the statistics tell you we're not doing much. 30% of that consumption in that third ranking as a country is actually from communications networks. So 29% of the energy consumption in that IT global community comes from us. So I think there's a couple things that need to happen. One, we need to treat it as any other metric in our business. And the way that Colt looks at this is being committed to science-based targets. And we've just been approved for Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. Scope 3, as you know, puts a major pressure on our entire supply chain. So what we will be doing is holding our partners and our vendors accountable to their sustainability commitments in order to ensure we can deliver the targets that we've committed to in Scope 3. I think the other thing that we have to look at is what are the actions on a daily basis that you're taking and your employees are taking to ensure that sustainability is at the center of your strategy. A couple of the things that we're doing is ensuring that as we put a piece of equipment into the network, we're actually taking something out. So everyone knows that the industry has racks and racks of equipment that are consuming large amounts of power, but actually producing very small amounts of bandwidth because they were created, 10, 15, even 20 years ago. There's pizza boxes that we can put in that have a much lower footprint and a much better energy consumption. We have to be serious about starting to remove some of this high impact equipment and replacing it with the new, and we need programs in order to center that into our strategy. We're greening our vehicles is another element that we're doing, and we already have a large amount of our service fleet that are electric vehicles. We've moved to green energy at almost every one of our states, of our sites, whether that be a co-location or a data center that we're engaging in, and we're making sure that there's a better level of energy. But I think it comes to innovation as well. I think these are all process-oriented things that we can do on a daily basis. But I do think just like we look at innovation in our technology, we have to look at innovation in how we actually create a green environment. And one of the things we're working on is a pilot right now with a company here in the UK around bioleaching. And what that does is actually take the equipment that we're taking out of those sites and bioleaching it so that we can regain the precious materials and then reuse those once again. So that's just one example of how I think we can bring process, we can bring our people, and we can bring the innovation around the scope of what needs to be done to truly have an impact on the climate and on meeting these scope 1, 2, and 3 targets as we go forward.
Thank you, Keri. And you spoke there about some of the innovative work that you're doing at Colt and that you plan to continue to do. But collectively, how do telcos convince the world, and more importantly, their customers and potential customers, that they have indeed become green telcos and they are serious about improving sustainability throughout their networks and businesses when there's, generally speaking, a real lack of metrics? So How do you track, or how does the industry track improvements? How does industry rate themselves against competitors? Regulators aren't really imposing this on a country by country basis. So is there a way that we can demonstrate progress and measure results?
I think it's something that we really need to consider. I know that the Global Leaders Forum that I'm on is starting to think about this, a bit broader, and I think it does come down to metrics. Unfortunately, there aren't many metrics that are around this. We can measure power consumption. That is the one thing that we can measure, and we can measure footprint. And so I do believe that there are software programs and probes that are now coming to the forefront that can help us. And we're working directly with EcoVadis to start thinking about the reporting mechanism. And that's not just on the E side, the environment side, but also on the social and government side of the equation. And I think if we start really considering that the work, the ratings, and the measurement that EcoVadis and some of the other companies like that have been doing for quite a while are not only to check a box in our shareholder meetings, but they actually provide the insights that we need, then maybe we start taking it more seriously as far as what we actually are reporting on, how we're reporting on it, and then gaining and gathering the data in order to make that happen. But we're at an infancy state as far as that data reconciliation and even the ability to actually gather some of the data that's out there on the field. But I think as an industry, just like we came together many years ago on the customer experience and using a metric like NPS around that, I think we have to start thinking about the metrics and the measurements and how we are actually pulling that data so that we have a unified definition of what that is across the industry. And that work needs to be done in the next 12 months.
Absolutely. Keri, thanks very much for telling us about the efforts that you're making to change Colt and make Colt into a green telco and what the industry should do collectively itself. As always, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for your contribution to the Great Telco Debate.
Thank you.